Hey, what's up, everyone, and welcome back to Cinematic Reviews presented by Quantum Podcasts. As always, I will be your host, Chris, and this is a show about all things movies and TV, where we return to the MCU for our marathon in preparation for Avengers Doomsday, which comes out on December 18th this year. We're only 6 months away from the next Avengers adventure, I guess you could say, against Doctor Doom. But today we're going to be talking about Moon Knight. This is our featured series today. We do have one reaction for you as well. I will find you the newest Netflix series starring Sam Worthington. So I'm going to briefly talk about that. Then we'll jump into Moon Knight, which is a character I was never really exposed to growing up. I knew of Moon Knight. I knew about the character, the general basis behind him. But I never read the comics, never really surfed the internet for background on him, his story. So when this show came out, this was my first real exposure to Moon Knight. I didn't really know what to think of it. Rewatched it a couple times throughout the years that it's been out. Rewatched it again for this podcast, and I enjoyed it a lot. So I can't wait to talk about Moon Knight on today's episode. But before we get into all of that, a couple reminders at the top of the episode. You can watch the show every week at youtube.com/the cinematic reviews. You can also listen to the audio version on whichever podcast platform you deem worthy. You can watch the show on Spotify as well, and then you can listen to the audio version also. Check out the social media pages for the podcast on Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok. We're all over the place. Just search Cinematic Reviews. You can find all the pages there. Hit that follow button and support the show. Also, check out the official website of the show, cinematic-reviews.com. There's so much stuff to do on there. Set up a profile, and you can rate shows like Moon Knight with the popcorn rating scale that I use on every episode. You can check out the villain scales for all these. You can also rank the MCU, which we'll do on today's show as well. You can also check out all the episodes, all the shorts. So much to do on there. I just added the Hall of Best, which is all of the best in shows that I've done on the episodes so far. So you can go check out all of those. You can also check out all the blockbuster showdowns that I've done also on the episodes. And then there's a couple of upcoming blockbuster showdowns that you can kind of take a peek at as well. One is actually coming up. And on the next episode, our Supergirl episode, we're going to be pitting against Superman 2025 against this year's Supergirl. It's going to be a lot of fun. So much stuff to do on there. So set up a profile, start writing reviews like I do, start rating movies like I do, ranking them. So much fun. Test your knowledge on the trivia games on there. There's a lot to do. So check out the website, cinematic-reviews.com. So with that, let's head over to news and reactions for that Netflix series. For today's quick reaction, we've got I Will Find You, the newest series to hit Netflix, starring Sam Worthington as David Burrows. This is an interesting show. I was really into this one. It's about a father who was falsely imprisoned for murdering his son. He ends up receiving evidence from his former sister-in-law, suggesting that his son has actually been alive this whole time and he was simply kidnapped. This compels him to escape prison and go on this mission to seek the truth on what happened to his son. It's a really, really awesome crime series. It's only, I think, like 8 episodes, so it's a pretty quick binger for Netflix. It's Sam Worthington, doing his thing. He seems to be a one-note guy, but I really, really like him in here. He gives a really good performance. This is probably one of his best performances in recent years. He's been doing a lot of these streaming service shows, and I think this is one of his better ones. It's really, really good. So check it out. I gave it 4 popcorns on the popcorn rating. I thought about giving it 5, but I couldn't quite get it there. It doesn't really pop or do anything that really makes this show one of a kind. But 4 popcorns is still really good. I had a lot of fun watching it. It's a very interesting a story that kind of sucks you in there. okay, if he didn't kill his kid, what happened? Kind of a whodunit mystery crime thriller, which is really, really good. And like I said, it's only 8 episodes. This is a mini series, so it has a beginning, middle, and end. It's a quick binger to watch. It's really good. I really enjoyed it. So go ahead and check out I Will Find You on Netflix today. Let's head over to our featured series, Moon Knight.
I think I'm losing it.
We'll catch you on. You're bloody useless. Stevie.
Stephen. I can't tell the difference between life and dreams.
Thank you.
Lost the contact lens.
Hope you find it.
Thanks. Now hold the phone. Yeah.
Oh my God, you're alive. What's wrong with you, Mark?
Why did you call me Mark? It must be very difficult. The voice in your head. Shut up! There's chaos in you. Embrace the chaos.
So Moon Knight premiered on March 30th, 2022 on Disney Plus, and it ran through May 4th. It was only 6 episodes, so it's a pretty quick a binger. It's essentially a long movie, and one of the things that I'll bring up on today's episodes is whether this needed to be a series or if it needed to be a movie, and we'll touch on that a little bit. But before we get into that, the budget was $147.9 million, so this seems to be about average for these Marvel shows. It's about $150 million for the whole project. There really is no box office since it was a series. But it did kind of look up, was this show a hit? Was it a flop? What kind of was the vibes when this show was coming out? And it was one of the higher rated shows. Fans were enthusiastic about it. I think on like IMDb it was like 9 out of 10, 7 out of 10 for its rating. A lot of people seem to love it. This is a show that had to really grow on me as I rewatched it a few times. It was a show that about a character, like I said at the beginning of the episode, that I wasn't really exposed to, so I didn't know what I was really walking into. I knew it was this kind of anti-hero like hero within the Marvel universe that was kind of centered around Egypt and the god of the moon and things like that. But that's really all that I knew. I knew he had these really cool half moons blade things. I kind of recognized him from images from the comics and cartoons and things like that, but was never really exposed to Moon Knight. Never really did any research because it was a character that I was never really drawn to. But this show and Oscar Isaac's performance in the show, who plays Moon Knight, really kind of wants me to research it more, get familiar with it, and I want to see more Moon Knight in the MCU. It's been 4 years since we've seen Oscar Isaac as Moon Knight. We have that really cool post-credit scene where it's like, okay, he's still attached to Khonshu and he's still doing the Moon Knight thing. And that's it. We haven't had anything from this character or this part of the universe in 4 years. Now, maybe they're saving him for Avengers Doomsday or Avengers Secret Wars. Maybe they are going to eventually do a second season. But as of right now, there really isn't a whole lot on the Moon Knight in the MCU. It's just these 6 episodes, which is a shame because I would have really liked a season 2 to really expand on the character, let Isaac really cook as Mark and Steven. It's a really, really interesting story. So it centers around Stephen Grant, who discovers that he's being granted powers by an Egyptian god of the moon. But he soon finds out that these newfound powers can be both a blessing as well as a curse in his troubled life. He ends up realizing that he has a split personality syndrome. That is where Mark Spector comes in, who is actually the original. You know, the show presents it as if Stephen Grant is the original, but it is not. It is Mark Spector. Stephen Grant is a character of himself that he invented to deal with his childhood trauma, and we're going to talk about that for sure. But then there's a third entity as well, Jake Lockley, who we see at that post-credit scene that I talked about. He is this really French assassin, I think he was French, that is very mysterious and has the question, how many personalities does Mark Spector have? Is it just these three? Is there more that in a potential season 2 we could have discovered? There's a really dark cloud over Mark Spector as a character, and he has these different personalities to handle that trauma, particularly Stephen Grant, who is a really entertaining character in this show. Oscar Isaac does a fantastic job at portraying these three different guys, even if it's only for like 2 seconds in the post-credit scene, but mainly Mark and Steven, and how they interact with each other on screen is really, really awesome. I really like Oscar Isaac. It's one of my favorite projects of him, one of his best performances for sure, and I hope he gets an opportunity to dive into this character more in the MCU. 6 episodes isn't a whole lot to go off of, and really this could have been just a 2.5 hour movie, but they ended up doing a series, probably because at the box office, I mean, not a lot of people are probably going to be jumping out of their chairs in a Moon Knight movie, so they figured, well, let's throw it on Disney Plus. We have subscribers already on there. They can kind of just binge this thing every week. And this was kind of cool too, like similar to how I talked about on the Hawkeye episode, where like every week it's like, okay, what shenanigans is Kate Bishop and Hawkeye going to get into this week? It's kind of the same vibe as this, where it's like, okay, what kind of shenanigans is Steven going to get himself into, or what kind of shenanigans is Mark gonna make Steven get into? And it's a really cool week-to-week thing. So I think it worked better as a show because it left it kind of a mystery throughout the 6 weeks that it was premiering. Now, it could have been serviceable as well as a movie. Like, cool, I would have just sat down and watched a 2-hour movie of Oscar Isaac as Moon Knight, sure. But that's kind of the same thing what they did with this TV show too, with binging all 6 episodes. It's a pretty quick show. Like, the episodes aren't like egregiously long. They're about 40 minutes to 50 minutes a piece. So not too, but it's a story that takes 6 episodes to tell because there's so much stuff to unpack, especially the Mark Spector character. So that's why I think it works more as a series. When as before I was like, this could have easily been a movie. But after the rewatch for the episode today, I've realized now that it works better as a show because of the story they're trying to tell, because of what they're trying to dive into with the Mark Spector character. There's a lot to cover, and so it needed 6 episodes. So I really enjoyed it. It is one of the shows I think that got really sent under the radar. It kind of missed a lot of fans and potential new fans too. Like, it's taken me 4 years to realize how good of a show this is, and I'm glad we're doing it on the episode today because I was wrong about this show. I really, really like it. It's a really good show. One of Marvel's most interesting and compelling stories that they've told so far, and it's all due to the Oscar Isaac performance. And Ethan Hawke as the villain is pretty cool. I have some qualms with him, not his performance, but just the story around the character. But Oscar Isaac, this is his show, this is his performance, and he did a fantastic job with these multiple personalities that he's juggling. So let's dive into more of the cast here briefly. So like I said, Mark Spector, Stephen Grant, Jake Lockley, aka Moon Knight, and Mr. Moon Knight were all played by Oscar Isaac. Mr. Moon Knight was the Moon Knight version that Stephen Grant turned into. Moon Knight, of course, is the alter ego of Mark Spector. Jake Lockley, we didn't see his version of Moon Knight. I would assume that his version is probably similar to Mark Spector's. But Oscar Isaac has a lot to do in this show, and he did a really good job juggling it. Arthur Harrow, played by Ethan Hawke, he is the main villain of this story, even though there could be an argument made that Omnet, who is the god that he serves is the true villain of the show. But we're gonna say Ethan Hawke is the villain anyways as Arthur. And we don't get a whole lot of his backstory. He does reveal that he was the past Moon Knight for Khonshu. He ended up disagreeing with Khonshu, so he switched over to Omnet, and he carries around that staff that judges people. He's got the tattoo of the weight system that determines whether you are going to be a bad person in the future or you are a bad person now, and it instantly kills you for the sake of humanity. So basically, it's judge, jury, and executioner, whether you committed a crime or not. If it sees in your future that you will be a harm to society, it will destroy you right there. And we get to see that a couple of times. Whereas for Mark Spector, when he gets the cane, it's a lot of chaos, as Ethan Hawke explains, and it's all due to his past trauma. Like, he is not a bad guy deep down. It's just he has a lot of childhood trauma that he needs to deal with, and he does end up, somewhat dealing with it in this show, and we're going to talk about that for sure in a second here. But Ethan Hawke still does a really good performance. We're going to talk about him more in the villain scale, of course, in the rankings today. We have Lila, who is the wife of Mark Spector, who ends up being her own superhero. What was her name? And I can't remember her superhero name. It was one that kind of just came out of nowhere. She is this Scarlet Scarab is what her superhero name, alter ego is in this universe. She's a big part of the story, but I feel like she doesn't get enough to do. Like, we really get 2 really good episodes of her. Her dad obviously is a part of Oscar Isaac's past. He blames himself for his death. We have that really cool, intense scene where we finally see what happened. There was a Humvee explosion. Her dad died. He's bleeding out. He's crawling to Khonshu's shrine or temple or whatever it is in Egypt. And he basically sells his soul to live forever and not die. But he does hold a lot of guilt for her father's death. And that has really kind of destroyed him internally, which has created, Stephen Grant as this defense mechanism. When he can't handle his own shit, he switches over to Stephen, so Stephen can be kind of the life that he wanted to have. Has a mom that's still alive and loves him. Has a normal job, normal life. Just not going around killing people and having this chaotic life that Mark Spector lives. Stephen Grant is the normal version of him, and that's how he's able to cope with his trauma. But Lila, she was pretty good in here. Again, I feel like she could have had a lot more, and they kind of set her up to be, another side superhero, Scarlet Scarab, but we'll probably never see her character again. Khonshu. Now, I had to actually do some research on Khonshu because I'm not too familiar with him, but Khonshu is the god that gives Oscar Isaac the Moon Knight powers. So he is the god of healing and fertility, as well as the moon, of course, hence Moon Knight. And travelers are known to pray to him also for protection during the night. So he is this godlike entity that is tethered to Oscar Isaac. And he is kind of giving him the missions to go on and saying that they have to defeat Ahmet, who is the evilish, I guess, more evil god, who is attached to Arthur, Ethan Hawke's character. So we do see Khonshu pop up. He's got the really weird skull, and he's in a tux sometimes. He's got this big moon cane. Really creepy looking. That scene in the storage facility where he's just kind of popping up around Stephen Grant was kind of freaky. But Khonshu is a big character in here as he is tethered to Moon Knight. Then we also have Tarit, I think is how you say it. There's another god that we meet later on in the show during the Asylum episodes, which I think are my favorite episodes of the show. That's where I really get into it, is when Oscar Isaac gets sucked into the asylum after he's shot in the temple, and Stephen and Mark split. So there's 2 Oscar Isaacs on screen interacting with each other. Well, then they come up, they interact with this god that they've met, which is also named the Great One. The goddess of fertility and protection. She was worshipped for power embodied in her fearsome hybrid form, which is part hippopotamus, part crocodile, part lion, and also has a swollen human belly and breast. So it looks like a woman almost. But it's a talking hippopotamus, basically. And she is the one that kind of leads them through this journey, through that asylum, and reconciling the two personalities to become one, essentially, to balance the scales. You know, with the two hearts, as in two personalities, it was causing a unbalance in the scales of life. So it forced Mark to face his childhood trauma and to not be so reliant on the Steven personality to kind of just push the trauma away and forget it ever happened, to live this life. And that's kind of where she comes in to help to force Mark to face his childhood trauma. So that kind of, it's a pretty small cast. There's some other side characters in there, but those are the main five. It's a really small show. As far as the cast, and the story is really self-contained, which is probably one of the reasons why I like it. It doesn't need to be this grand scale with other Avengers popping in. This was the first show to have no previous Marvel characters whatsoever in it. This was an entirely new thing on its own, which I really appreciate. So with this being a character that I've never really been exposed to, we're bringing back comic versus show. So these are discrepancies or differences that the show changed from the comic. So the main perspective. In the comics, Mark Spector is the main personality that they follow, whereas the show, they really put Stephen Grant at the forefront, as he is the personality that Mark kind of created to handle his trauma. So, like I said at the beginning of the show, we think Stephen is the main character because of how they present it, when actually Mark is the original. Mark is the original, and he created Steven to deal with that trauma with his mother. Mr. Knight in the comic is a detective style alter ego to Moon Knight, whereas in the show it's combined with Steven. So it's like Steven's version of the Moon Knight character, whereas in the comics it's just kind of just a more alter ego of Moon Knight. The wife or love interest in the Moon Knight story. Well, in the comics it's Marlene. That is his love interest in the comics, and then in the show, Layla is Mark Spector's wife. So they really changed it there. Steven's wealth. I thought this was pretty interesting when I looked this up. So in the comic, Steven is actually a millionaire, getting rich off the earnings off the stock market, which he used Mark's mercenary money to kind of play around the stock market, and became a millionaire. In the show, he's like this modern-mannered, working-class museum gift shop worker, which I thought was an interesting. Probably made him feel more grounded. You know, if you would have made him a millionaire, it'd been like, oh, this guy's got a sweet life. But it also would have worked too, where, you know, Mark does all the mercenary stuff. He makes some money, and Steven is this really savvy stock market player and becomes a millionaire and lives this glamorous life. I think that would have been pretty cool. But it's also more endearing with him being just a simple old gift shop worker at a museum, and it really gets to let him stretch his love for the Egyptian culture and kind of ties into their adventures later on, because he's the one that helps them through all the temples and things like that with all of his knowledge. Arthur in the comics is a scientist suffering from facial paralysis who performs humans experiments. Was in the show, he's the former fist of Khonshu and rejects Khonshu for Amit. So very different backstory and who Arthur is as a character. The scientist one seems interesting, but with human experiments, that can get kind of dicey with the Disney project. I can see why they wouldn't want to dive into that. It's pretty messed up, but that was a big change that I noticed researching this. So those are just a few of the changes. More of the bigger ones that I thought were interesting, especially that millionaire one. That would have been really cool to see Steven be a millionaire from the stock market and go on this adventure. But I do like the museum gift shop worker too. That's a change that makes sense when you look at the show as a whole. So the story in season 1, I wanted to point this out. It's really good. I really enjoy it. When it gets revealed of Mark's trauma, it really kind of just like, holy shit, this got dark real quick. So Mark's brother unfortunately dies from drowning as they were playing one day. And after he dies, his mother blames Mark. Like, she straight up puts him on the spot at the wake and says, "This is all your fault. What are you doing here?" And just over the years, that's all she ever felt until she died. She blamed Mark for everything. She was mean to him. She physically abused him, emotionally, mentally abused him. And this forced him to create Steven as a defense mechanism on how to handle the trauma from his mother and the death of his brother. Mark blames himself, partially because he's the one that wanted to go out and play that day, but also because his mom pounded into his brain that it was his fault. And it takes, Steven and Layla and all these other characters to make him realize that you were just a kid. It wasn't your fault. Your mother was wrong. Like, she abused you physically, emotionally, mentally. She was wrong. She was the bad guy. And he created this world where Steven got to have a loving mother that, talked to her on the phone every day, was going on dates. And it's just really, really heartbreaking when you get to that episode where Steven is realizing that he isn't the original like he originally thought. He is the other personality within Mark. Mark is the original, and that is world breaking. And that was probably my favorite episode, is when all that trauma gets revealed that Mark went through as a kid. It's really heartbreaking. With that said, though, it's a pretty uneventful ending. Like, it kind of just ends. And then the post-credit scene is actually the real ending. So if you miss the post-credit scene, that to me is the actual ending of the show, where it reveals that Mark, so to speak, is still working with Khonshu through Jake Lockley. There's a third personality. They kill Arthur in cold blood after he gets sent to the asylum. And it just ends. It's kind of an uneventful ending where they defeat Arthur, Mark does, and kicks him into an asylum for being crazy. Not really world-shattering or just like, wow, that was a really awesome ending. And that's kind of the issue that these Marvel shows had, is the endings. The endings were very lackluster, very uneventful, and it just kind of just ended. They needed an ending, they needed a third act, and they kind of just quickly wrote it. And Moon Knight's the same, unfortunately. But this story as a whole was really, really good. One of the best that they've done. And I was so wrong to just shit all over this show, because I really do like it. It's one of the better shows for sure. It's just the ending was really, really uneventful, and it just ended kaput. And who knows if we're going to get more. So the future of Moon Knight, season 2, it's up in the air. I think if we haven't got it now, we might not get it. We'll see what happens post Doomsday and Secret Wars. Maybe they kind of go back and say, hey, maybe we need to expand Moon Knight. Maybe we need to do more with that character. Will he be in Doomsday and Secret Wars? I'm not sure. Let's see if it was confirmed yet. I guess I haven't really looked. Doomsday, Moon Knight. Let's see if he was confirmed as a cast member. I can't remember. So he's not confirmed yet. But it's looking like he's probably not going to. Maybe they introduce another personality if he does pop up. But it's looking very likely that this could be the last of Moon Knight in the MCU. Oscar Isaac, he's not getting any younger. He's got a lot of other projects he's working on. But I would like to see him back as Moon Knight. He was really, really good in this show. He's what made this show as good as it was, along with the story. But the performance of Mark and Steven was fantastic. It's one of my favorite performances by Oscar Isaac. I think it's one of his best for sure. So let's get to all the categories, and then we'll jump into the rankings to end up things. So, iconic scenes. There's a lot of great scenes in here, but I try to, cut it down to 4 or 5 of them like I always do. So, Moon Knight beating down the creature in the museum bathroom. This is where it gets revealed that Moon Knight exists. We get to see Mark take over the body and summon the power of the Moon Knight. And it's a very intense beatdown in the bathroom where you just hear a bunch of punching, and then it's revealed this white cloaked figure is beating the shit out of this monster, turns around, and that was the end of the episode. That was a really awesome opening to the show. Episode 1 was really, really good. I liked how they opened this and introduced the Moon Knight character. You know, got Steven freaking out in the bathroom. You got Mark in the mirror talking to him. I really like those interactions between Steven and Mark through whether it's like a reflective surface or when we're in the asylum when there are 2 Oscar Isaacs on screen. Really like the interactions. But this scene was a really awesome way to introduce Moon Knight. And then this one, this is exactly how I wrote this. Dude gets terrified in Egypt. So if you remember this scene that I'm talking about, it's where Layla and Steven are kind of investigating the temple, and they come across this like sacrificial room where they got the table with blood all over it, and there's dead bodies upstairs with all these different ritual stuff. And this weird creature thing comes in, dragging a dude, slams him on the table, and just starts gutting him in front of Steven and Layla. So that's the first thing that came to mind. Is like, this is straight up Terrifier, and he's gutting this dude right in front of him. It was one of the more graphic things that Marvel has done so far, so I had to put that in there. The asylum sequence, the whole thing with the 2 Oscar Isaacs and meeting the hippo and things like that. But I wanted to point out one specific part, and that's the Mark and Steven scream, which became a meme. And Oscar Isaac did such a really good job at doing each distinct scream. It was so good. And I love the asylum sequence. One of my favorites. Steven sees Mark's past for the first time. Now this is where I really get into the show. This is where I realized that, oh, I was so wrong about this show. This is actually a really, really good story, and it's heartbreaking at the same time. Steven going up the different like stories of the apartment to see each page of the story unfold. It was a really cool design, and the way that the cinematography did it with tracking him up the stairs and each level being more and more terrifying, essentially. And Steven finally realizing that Mark created him based off a show that he loved to watch as a kid as a defense mechanism against all the horrible stuff that his mom did to Mark. And then Mark switches to Steven at his mother's wake. This is a very sad and intense moment where he comes to his mother's wake. He sees his father in the window. You know, he's clearly an alcoholic. He's drinking out of a flask. His father's like, hey, come in here. You know, come be with me. Come be with the family. And Mark's just like, fuck that. I just can't deal with this. So he's walking down the street. He's crying. He's like in turmoil. And he switches to Steven. And Steven comes out and he's like, oh my God, where am I? This isn't London. You know, he's calling his mom. Hey, Ma, I got lost again. Where are you? It's such a heartbreaking scene. And Oscar Isaac did such a fantastic job. Specifically in this moment here where he switches to Steven, because he's just in tears. He's broken. And his defense mechanism kicks in. And Steven comes out. And it's just a whole different another person. Steven has no idea what's going on. He doesn't know where he is. And that is the purpose of Steven, is to live this life that Mark wanted to have and should have had if it wasn't for the abuse that he had as a child. Very heartbreaking. Iconic, though, the scene that I think of the most when I hear the title Moon Knight is that Moon Knight beatdown, that reveal of who Moon Knight is, what he looks like in that bathroom. Was really, really cool. Great way to introduce our superhero for sure. Favorite quotes. There's a few in here. I had a tough time finding some really good ones. So it's kind of a shorter list, but these ones are really stuck out to me. So this one's from Steven. I'm sorry, Mr. Great, as he's breaking into Alexander the Great's, whatever you call those Egyptian coffins. I'm not an Egyptian expert, but in the tomb. This one from Khonshu. Oh, the idiot's in control. That scene where Steven is driving around in that ice cream truck and he's kind of going in and out, in and out. That was a really cool sequence and a great way to kind of add some more mystery and chaos to the show. Was the random switches between Steven and Mark, and Steven waking up and not knowing where the hell he is. He's driving the bus I thought about putting that in the iconic scenes, and I probably should have as I talk about it now. But that was a really cool one. And you hear Khonshu in the background just like, oh, great. The freaking idiot's in control now of the body. Come on, Mark, get out of here. Come on, get out here. We can't have Steven taking control. This one from Mark Spector. Yeah, the ceremonial armor from Khonshu's temple, not Psycho Colonel Sanders. This is when Steven turns into Mr. Knight. He's like, yeah, but you told me to put the suit on. He goes, yeah, the Moon Knight armor, not this psycho dude in a white suit, you know? So that was a really cool interaction between Mark and Steven. This one again from Steven. Like, if they just sprang to life right now and asked me a riddle for passage, I'd be thrilled. I'd shit myself, of course, but I'd be thrilled. Really funny Steven moment. Khonshu, then rise and live again as my fist of vengeance, as my Moon Knight. And then Steven, later's Gators, as kind of a line that him and his mother shared as they say goodbye. Really, really sweet. My favorite one is probably all the idiots in control. You know, Khonshu just like, oh, great, the worm is here, or the idiot's in charge. Fun facts. Kind of a shorter list. Not a whole lot that I was able to research on this, but these ones stuck out to me the most. For the scenes where Steven and Mark interact with each other, rather than have Oscar Isaac try to act against a green screen stand-in or an extra, Marvel hired Isaac's brother, the journalist actor Michael Benjamin Hernandez, to serve as his double as a way to help Isaac act opposite himself. Isaac said during a Moon Knight press conference that his brother is the closest thing to him there is on Earth. This way, Isaac was able to seamlessly differentiate between the characters and was able to feed off of Hernandez's energy as if he was acting against himself. That's really cool. I like it when they have actual body doubles, when they want to do these, you know, copy character scenes with twins and things like that. It's tough. I'm sure it's got to be really tough, you know, just performing at a random extra or somebody you don't have a connection with, or just doing it in front of a green screen by yourself. It's got to be kind of awkward. It was cool that they got his brother, which makes sense because the whole trauma behind Mark's character was his brother dying. So Oscar having his brother on set with him probably was a really good chemistry building thing, and why the performance is so good. So I'm really glad that they ended up doing it that way. To better understand his character's dissociative identity disorder, also known as DID, Oscar Isaac read A Fractured Mind, the 2005 memoir, who is about this guy through his therapy in his 40s, that the blackouts, depression, and alcoholism that had plagued him were a result of 11 distinct personalities. In his research, Isaac learned that DID is predominantly caused by prolonged abuse that starts in early childhood. So this scholar, this China scholar, Robert, wrote this book about his experiences like Mark and Steven have in the movie, in the show, where he has blackouts and things like that because he had 11 different personalities. That is wild to think that there's 11 different personalities in one single body. For right now, we only know Mark having 3. Mark, Jake, and Steven. I can't imagine 11. That is a crowded mind. But that's really cool that Isaac did the research for sure. Mark Spector's Moon Knight suit has hieroglyphics on his trousers, which read, "Rise and live again as my fist of vengeance, my Moon Knight." Those are also the words that Khonshu speaks to him. All the scenes set in Egypt were actually shot in Budapest, Hungary. Moon Knight was set to be filmed in Egypt, but due to difficulty of obtaining permits, the shooting was moved to Hungary. Approximately 3 billion Egyptian pounds, which equates to about $165 million, were spent in the Hungarian capital, Budapest, during the filming, which basically has got to be a huge chunk of their budget. But that is unfortunate they didn't get to film in Egypt, but it still looked pretty good. You know, it was that they did their best to dress up Hungary as Egypt. And then the series was going to make a reference of Ramatat, a Kang the Conqueror variant that was later cut. Well, that would have been cool, but really has nothing to do with this now since they kind of cut the Kang character out because of the whole Jonathan Majors thing outside of the out in the real world. But But yeah, like I said, I really enjoyed Moon Knight this time around. I was really wrong about it. This was way low on the rankings, and I have a new ranking now for it coming up here shortly. But yeah, I really liked it. If you haven't seen Moon Knight in a while, definitely give it a rewatch. It's an easy binge. It's only 6 episodes. They're about 40 to 50 minutes each. Some of them I think are even like 35 minutes. So it's pretty easy watch. Really good story. Really great performance by Oscar Isaac. I absolutely love him in this show. It's a fantastic one. I'm so glad that I get to be wrong on the show today, because this is a show that I really did enjoy. So let's take a quick break, and then we'll wrap things up with the rankings. This episode is brought to you by Dubby Energy. Still drinking energy that quits before you do? Stop crashing, stop shaking, and start performing. Meet Dubby Energy, clean energy made for gamers, creators, and anyone who refuses to slow down. With zero sugar, no jitters, and no crash, Dubby keeps you locked in whether you're grinding ranked, streaming for hours, or pushing through those late nights. There's no crash, no fade, just gas. Drink different, perform better. Grab Dubby Energy and use code Cinematic10 to get 10% off your order today. So we're going to start off with the MCU ranking of Moon Knight. I'm going to pull up the ranking list on the Cinematic Reviews website. Again, you can rank the MCU like I did at cinematic-reviews.com. Just set up a profile and get to ranking, everybody. So Moon Knight comes in at 27 on the list. I had it way down. I had it at like 43 or 42, something like that. But it jumped up to 27 for me after this rewatch. Looking at what it's around, Thor Love and Thunder at 28, Werewolf by Night at 29, Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness at 30, which will be the next episode that we'll talk about. Same thing with Thor. And then right above it, we've got the Guardians of the Galaxy Holiday Special at 26, the Avengers at 25, WandaVision at 24, Ant-Man at 23, Ant-Man and the Wasp at 22, Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania at 21, and then Black Panther at 20. So Moon Knight, 27th. I was really wrong about this show. I really like it. It's Oscar Isaac's performance is what does it for me. He did such a great job at embodying both Steven and Isaac, and then briefly Jake, but mainly Steven and Mark. He did a really good job at giving us two distinct characters that we can fall in love with and root for. And just understand his trauma as a child is just really heartbreaking. So Moon Knight comes in at 27th. The villain scale. So Ethan Hawke is our villain today as Arthur. Again, for the villain scale, we look at the performance by the actor, the motivation behind the villain, and the costume. Well, the costume, he looks like Egyptian Jesus most of the time. I mean, he's got the silk, rags on, simple guy traveling around the world. Eventually, when we get to the asylum part of it, he's he's got the therapist outfit. He's got the vest. He's got the little tie. He's got the glasses. He's got a haircut. He's got a little goatee, But he wears the sandals with the glass chips in there, which confused the crap out of me when I first watched the show, and it still does. I think it's some kind of penance that he does, where he has to walk on glass, and just blood everywhere. You get that scene in the asylum where he's walking, Oscar Isaac sees him leave bloody footprints, and that's how he knows that, oh, this is full of shit. This thing is fake. But the costume is all right. The performance by Ethan Hawke is pretty good. That's what saves the rank for me. I gave Arthur, Ethan Hawke 3 Thanos heads. Not a mind-blowing villain, doesn't really leave much to be anticipated or enthusiastic about. It's kind of a whatever villain. It's back to like phase 1 villains that we talked about with Iron Man and Thor and things like, well, not Thor because that was Loki, but like Iron Man, just kind of throwaway villains. And the motivation behind him. That's what kind of did it for me too, was to save the rating too. I totally get it. He was the Moon Knight before disagreed with Khonshu. He's like, well, we need to act now. We can't just, enact your type of vengeance. We need to pull the root. We need to pull it out by the root. We need to stop it in its tracks, and that's why he switched over to Amit, because the philosophical disagreements with Khonshu about vengeance and how to save the world. So it's a pretty understandable motivation, but it's just the writing wasn't there for me on that character. Like I said, it's kind of just a throwaway villain. Just a villain because they needed a villain. They needed somebody to be an antagonist to Oscar Isaac. So that's why I just landed on 3 Thanos heads. Ethan Hawke, I love Ethan Hawke. He does the best he can with what he's got, and he kind of makes it his own, but it just wasn't, nothing really special. So 3 Thanos heads for the villain of Moon Knight. And then the popcorn rating. 4 popcorns is what I gave it. Mostly due to the fact that Oscar Isaac just kills it. He is awesome as Steven and Mark. The villain, like I said, nothing special. The story is great until it just ends. It just ends uneventful. So that's why I couldn't get it up to 5 popcorns, even though I really, really want to. So I'm going to stick with 4 popcorns. It's really, really good. I was so wrong about this show, and I'm glad I was. I enjoyed the heck out of this show. And I'm glad I got to do it dedicated a whole episode to it finally. We briefly talked about it on the show when it came out and kind of lumped it together with a Marvel show back when this was just an audio podcast. But now I get to dedicate a whole episode for Moon Knight, and I'm glad I did. I really, really enjoyed this show. If you're kind of in the same boat as me where you're like, Moon Knight was okay, it wasn't great, give it another rewatch. It's definitely one that deserves more rewatches. There's a lot to be explored more in a season 2, and I do hope we get a season 2. I really want to dive more into the Mark and Steven relationship. Oscar Isaac just killed it. It's a good show. I really, really like this show. So check out Moon Knight today on Disney Plus. 6 episodes, easy binger. I had a lot of fun watching it for the episode today. It was really awesome. So that's going to do it for this week's Marvel episode. Like I said, Doctor Strange and Multiverse of Madness will be our next one next week. And then I think it's Thor, Love and Thunder afterwards. I can't remember for sure if Miss Marvel is before that. But we got kind of a mixture of movies and shows coming up. It's going to be a lot of fun. Supergirl is out now. We're going to do a new release episode of Supergirl as well. I'll also react to the Jackass movie, which comes out this weekend as well. So it's a busy movie weekend for sure. A lot of content coming out. Again, check out the Cinematic Reviews website, cinematic-reviews.com. Set up a profile. Go ahead and rate Moon Knight with the popcorn rating. Rank it in your MCU rankings. There's so much to do on the website. Go check that out. Thank you guys. Have a good rest of your weekend, and we'll see you all next time on the show.